about software security teams today, and the stuff I'm going to talk about today applies only and directly to software teams. It doesn't apply to traditional IT security teams. This is really just a focus on software security groups. A couple ground rules before we get started, because I think it's important to think about this in a different way. One is I'm going to say some stuff that you're probably not going to agree with, and that's totally cool. But I want you to think about it for a minute, because I'm coming from a place of trying this in 4 different companies and having it work very well, and getting the things I need out of it. And the other thing is about what you take back to your job, because this is something we forget about a little bit too often, and it's the rule of 2 feet, right? If any of this stuff resonates with you, and then you go back to your job and you just can't do it, the rule of 2 feet applies, right? There's a lot of people hiring right now. Walk around this booth, the vendor area, walk around this conference, there's a lot of people hiring, right? There's no reason you can't go find the job that lets you do this kind of stuff the right way. Now, that being said, none of this is really all that groundbreaking or revolutionary, so you should be okay. But it's something to keep in mind, and something I like to remind people of is, go to a place that lets you be you and lets you accelerate. But before we get really into it, I want to talk about the different things we call this, right? I hear people call it product security, application security, software security, Azure security. There's all kinds of different ways we mention or kind of curate this topic. But there's one common piece here, and that's software. It's all about software. Writing code, delivering code, whatever you want to call it. We'll start with this. What's the most important part of software? Anybody have any thoughts or opinions on what the most important part of software is? Should be an obvious one. Delivery. Software doesn't do anything unless you deliver it. It has to be shipped. It has to go to production. It has to work. It has to do its thing, make the money, perform the business part, whatever you want to call it, right? The most important part of software is delivery. If you don't deliver the software, it's useless. It doesn't do anybody any good. It just costs money. And that's the whole point of this, and why I want to change the way we make our teams. And I want to start from examining the traditional state of the industry. Most teams that I've seen or talked with look kind of like this, or have a process that looks kind of like this. There's some development that happens. It's thrown over to a wall, or thrown over the wall, gets tested. The results get thrown back over the wall, and they get fixed or not fixed. And there's kind of this back and forth. There's waiting periods. And there's also lack of communication. There might be a team that'll look at some code and throw a PDF back over the wall. I don't know how many of you have had to digest a PDF and try to fix something based on it, but it doesn't work very well, right? Filing tickets based on that and trying to interpret what they said. It's just messy, right? And the more you do this, the more, the game of telephone gets played, context gets shifted, people don't get the point of what both sides are trying to say, and you end up with something like this, right? It's this battle, right? You end up with this wall, and it's just, one team defending their wall and the other team, trying to get through it. I hate this idea. This is terrible. Too much waiting, too much telephone, too much missed context, not enough collaboration. It doesn't work. It doesn't work at all. Yes, some things will get fixed here and there, and that's great. But you don't have the kind of velocity and collaboration and really skills and tools you need to make it work. It's supposed to look like this. This is actually it. This is what it really looks like if you do it right. This idea, right, where you have security and engineering working in the same place or on the same team is really how it was meant to be done in the first place, right? How many of you have lots of different teams, even engineering teams in your organization? Between those different teams, when somebody needs something from another team, what happens? Same thing, right? Throw it over the wall and wait, right? Same thing I'm talking about here. All I'm talking about is just another engineering team and really being exposed to just the same problems you have already. But the software security group is just another engineering team. That's all it is, right? Anybody who tells you differently has a different agenda, right? the whole point of this is to create software with the engineering folks, right? The software security group is also delivering software as well, outside of just, the normal security stuff. Question for you. In your organizations, how many of the folks in your software security group could get hired, could pass the developer interview and just become a developer in your organization? Anybody have a team that is capable of doing that? One hand, one partial head nod. This is it. So the other questions are kind of not even a point, right? So I guess lead developer is maybe architecture role, that kind of thing. So I guess there's no's in a lot of that. But the software security group actually should be one of your strongest engineering teams. Anybody have a guess as to why? Why would you take some of your strongest engineers and put them in your software security group? It's part of it, right? Experience is has a big role in this. Your software security group is going to encounter a lot of code, different times. They're not going to have seen it before, maybe. They're going to jump into problem spaces they haven't seen before and have to understand them and make choices on them quickly. You can't do that as a junior. You have to have time under your belts, experience, knowledge. You have to have the skills to jump into something you haven't seen, understand it quickly, and be effective at it. That's why the most experienced folks should be in this group. Understanding how systems are put together, not just at a code level, but at a design level, right? How do these fit together? Why do they fit together? Why do they fail when they're put together in a certain fashion? All that stuff is really, really, really important, and you can't, time is really how you get there. And lots of experience will help you get there faster. This is different, of course, and I'll talk about the how later, but there's a couple of things that I like around this that I think are worth talking about, right? It's tension, direction, respect, and collaboration. When you're going to do this, you have to be pointing in the right direction. Everybody has to have the same goal. This sounds obvious, right? But it doesn't. It gets a little more watered down as you get into it. Pointed in the same direction means you have the same goals. A lot of times, the security team's goal is to prevent something from happening, right? So a bad thing from happening, or several bad things from happening. And the engineering group's goal is to ship something. But if the engineering group is going to ship something that might have something bad happen, now we have the conflicting goals, right? Now the two teams are saying, well, I have a goal of not letting you do this, and you have a goal of doing this, and now we have to do this until we figure it all out. If you give people objectives like that, very concrete objectives of don't let this happen, it's the wrong direction, right? Somebody's pointing this way and somebody's pointing that way, and they're opposing forces, and they're just going to tug at each other until nothing happens. If the goal is to ship software, right, to deliver software, the teams are working together to get it out the door, right? It sounds like a simple thing, but it makes a huge world of difference. Is both teams are pointing in the right direction saying this has to ship. So I need both teams to do exactly what they need to do to make sure the software goes out, gets delivered on time. Which means the security team isn't saying you have something wrong. The security team is saying there's something wrong and here's how you fix it, or here's the patch for it, right? It's helping them go out the door faster. And it's not the hold up, it's the out the door. If you don't have the same objectives, then nobody wins. It's a tugging forces problem. You have two teams that have different objectives trying to prevent the other from doing their job. How many of you have come across that? I see a lot of people who are probably still sleeping, because that's it, right? This is the traditional problem we have in security. It happens everywhere, right? You have an opinion, you have an objective, you have a goal, and somebody goes, I got to do this instead, right? And so some of it's a place of of tension, some of a place of ignoring, right? I hear you, but I'm not going to do that, right? And so you have to argue, you have to fight, you have to try to get your way. The best way to do this is mutual respect. Again, it sounds kind of obvious, but moving your software security group to a team of engineers means you're going to work with the engineering team day to day, every day, day in and day out. The folks on that group could pass your developer interview. In fact, I won't hire anybody for the product security team that can't pass the developer interview. They go through their own development interviews, and if the development team says, cool, then we talk about security stuff. But if we can't get past that hurdle, not going to work. I want to be able to walk in the door with a team of people who the development team respects and says, yeah, I want to work with these guys. They know what they're doing, right? Because a lot of times you'll end up with a mixed bag of skills, and somebody will say, oh yeah, well I found this bug, right? Or our tool found this bug. Maybe I had an automated pen test that found a bug. And you throw it over the wall and they say, not a bug, go away. And this happens a few times, or a few dozen times. Now you start to lose respect, right? The team goes, these guys keep bugging me with stuff that doesn't even matter, doesn't even exist, right? And now you have this, you start to kind of develop this attitude towards a team who's giving you basically noise all the time. Now, that being said, some groups are really great at filtering that stuff out, and they do an awesome job there. So that's not an everything situation, but it happens over time. But if you have a group that says, hey, I found this bug, and by the way, here's a pull request or a patch to fix it. It goes, oh, great, thanks. No skin off my back. I just make sure the code works as intended, and we move on, right? It didn't really stop my day. I didn't have to stop and do something. This code's just kind of done. That's a huge thing, right? That starts to build up trust. The team is on your side. This mutual respect is super, super important because it unlocks a few things down the road. When you don't have that mutual respect, right, if each side doesn't take each other seriously, right, this goes both ways, right? This is the engineering team, getting noise from a security team, or, a security team not trusting engineering, right, because they keep making all these mistakes. And that's just, it's toxic. That's all it is. It's straight up toxic. And eventually it'll ruin you. So, if your security team starts seeing a bunch of mistakes, the same kind of mistakes over and over again, the solution isn't to keep hammering the engineering team to fix it. The solution is to write a library that doesn't make it happen anymore, right? If you have cross-site scripting everywhere, you don't keep saying there's cross-site scripting problems. You write a library, find a library, and say everybody needs to use this library so we don't have cross-site scripting problems anymore, right? Google did this. And they haven't had problems with that, I think, for several years now, right? They made a big effort. It took them a long time, but they did it. That is the answer to this problem, right? Make sure it doesn't happen anymore. It's not about finding it. It's about finding it and fixing it. And that's why having folks that can write that code matter. Folks that can see this pattern, recognize the pattern, and fix it. That's what really matters. When you have the adversarial relationships, it's again, just throwing stuff over the walls. And this kind of breeds egos, right? How many of you had a situation where the biggest problem in the room was actually the egos? Yeah, right? People's feelings get hurt, right? They think their jobs are on the line. Most people will try to do the best thing they can. They're trying to do the right thing. They're trying to do their job. But when somebody feels like their job is in jeopardy because a bunch of stuff keeps happening, they're going to start to naturally want to defend themselves. And eventually you'll get egos in the way. So toxicity breeds this kind of environment where even if you're right, they might tell you to go away because they just don't want to deal with you anymore. But that's one piece of it, right? Because when you go further in the right direction, when you have that mutual respect, you can actually start to have healthy tension. How many of you get what I mean when I say healthy tension? It means that you and I can have a knockdown dragout about the real details and walk away fine, right? We can have like a straight up shouting match and disagree, but we're doing it in the same direction. We're not talking past each other. We're talking about the right thing, and we're really actually getting to the point, right? We're going to have a real honest-to-God discussion, not about politics or about who should do what on what date or what it is. It's about the details, about why this thing should be fixed and really how it should go. That kind of, the ability to do that only comes if you trust them, if both people trust each other. They have to trust and respect each other first. If you don't have that, you can't have those kind of discussions. You'll have service discussions. And each person's holding some kind of agenda they're not talking about, right? You have to shed all of that stuff and get to the actual point, right? The healthy tension gets you to the real issues, the stuff that actually matters. So often, in all of our jobs, we don't have that. And in some places you're not going to get that ever. Unfortunately, it sucks. But try to find places where you can. You'll get a lot more done, a lot more effectively when you have that. So find a few people you can do this with. And then when it works, show people why, right? Then you start to kind of move it out. So the how. This is the part where I'm going to deviate from the standard a little bit. Instead of pen testers, hire software engineers. Step one. I've interviewed folks on the phone and said, software security group is about software for me, for whatever company I'm working at the moment. It's about software. I want to talk about software. And they tell me, well, that's not what AppSec is. Yeah, it is. It's about software. No, it's not. Yes, it is. And we argue for a little while. And then, what about pen testing? Great. Do pen testing. That's wonderful. We should do that. Or we'll hire somebody to do it for us. Either way, it'll get done. What do you do when the pen test is over? You give it to the engineering team. No, you don't. You filter it out. You try to fix what you can. You give them every piece of advice or every leg up you can. And whatever you can't fix, then you work with them to fix it. And you make sure you understand it for next time. You find the patterns and you provide them libraries. It's a huge response. When you have a pen test, it's not just about throwing it over the wall. It's about digesting and offering all the solutions that go along with it. And making sure that if there's a big pattern, you identify it and say, hey, along with this, there was this thing, and we're going to work on this with you guys. We're going to make sure this pattern just goes away entirely. Right? It's way more than just running a tool and verifying a tool. The next few steps are never followed. And that's a huge, huge thing. A team of developers that understand this is going to take it and try to fix it. It's going to go one step further. This is personal experience and personal opinion. But I think it is actually much easier to train developers in security than it is to train traditional IT security folks in software. Lead time is faster. When you think about the discipline of software engineering, there's a whole lot to think about, right? There's, language or languages of choice, the frameworks and the tools, the stuff underneath it, the databases, the networking, all the stuff underneath it, right? The full stack is large, and it takes a long time to get through the whole thing. If we're talking about the OWASP top 10 for a web app, we can learn it in a weekend, right? If we're talking about some of the basic things that get you out the door on, application security, especially when it relates to the web or mobile, there's focused sets of knowledge to learn, right? There are common attacks. There are things that they can look for right away, right? You can teach somebody in a few hours how to find and fix certificate pending vulnerabilities in web and mobile applications, right? There's very focused content. And you can find that area of focus for whatever it is you're building, and you can go down that road and find very, very quick, focused learning. I think this is why you can get the general wins faster. Now, it takes a lot longer to master security, just like it does to master software engineering. I'm not going to argue that at all. They're two different disciplines, and they take a lifetime to learn. But the basics you can learn fast. And that's where you can get a lot of leverage. I'm not saying don't hire any security folks in your software security group. That's kind of silly. But I'm saying you can start to staff a team with software engineers and at least one person who understands security and train them and mentor them, right? Finding somebody who is a good engineer and a really good security person, they're called unicorns for a reason. And they're really expensive also. Most of the time, you don't have $500,000 a year to pay this person. The budget's not there. And that's about what they cost. Straight up, I'm not kidding. I've tried to hire a bunch of these people recently, and I get to the interview, I'm like, oh, great, let's talk comp. And they're like, oh, yeah, I get paid $500,000 right now, so you're going to have to be better than that. I'm like, Jesus Christ, okay. Wow. This has happened often, most of the time, right? They're making a lot of money, and they're very happy with doing what they're doing, because when companies find them, they tend to latch on. So it's not about taking them and hiring them. It's about building them, right? We're going to have to build the next generation of software security group members. That's it. The colleges are not doing this, right? Colleges are you might have one course on ethics that lumps in some security into it in software, or maybe one software security focused course that just does crypto or something, right? So it's not an education thing. It's not going to happen at a college. It may or may not happen on a job. You're going to have to build them. You find the people that understand this stuff, and you build a team that way. Hiring is hard for this. Waiting for a rec to get filled before you start doing security doesn't work, right? So you make do with what you have. And that's actually how I got started on this. I was really desperately trying to find folks, and I said, okay, I'm going to grab some engineers that are interested in this and just go. We're going to train them. We're going to do it. And it works. It works quite well. But there's a few things outside of normal vulnerabilities that have to happen as well. You cannot do this. There's a few other areas of just the normal, OWASP top 10 and other things to train that really, really matter. And again, this is security discipline that we all in this room have, done before, but there are things not to forget about. One is threat modeling. If you're going to have a group of engineers that haven't had a security background first, you have to teach them threat modeling. They have to understand where things will break and why. They have to understand and look at a diagram and go, from a different perspective, not why this is not going to scale, but where somebody's going to attack this. Threat modeling is an absolutely critical piece of knowledge to teach people. I mean, I would want to teach the entire software engineering world about threat modeling because I think there's a whole bunch of really interesting things that come out of it. But really, really important to take this in. And too often, this is kind of misunderstood and just skipped over. And the other thing is risk. This goes both ways. A lot of times, we communicate in terms of absolutes, right? There's a vulnerability. It has to get fixed. And without any understanding of how it impacts the business, what could go wrong, what the losses are, I mean, I'm not going to talk about risk at all. That's a whole different subject. But a good and grounded understanding of risk is a huge thing. How often do you push the big button? You know, the no, you can't. I'm saying you can't do this. Stop, right? Like when you waste when you cash in your chips and go, nope, we're not doing that. How many of you have done that before? What does it cost you? What does that ask cost you? It costs you everything, right? You can only hit that button a couple of times before now you're crying wolf. You have to use that very, very sparingly. You have to know when's appropriate to do this. I'm going to talk about why it's easier with an engineering group and other people, but that's down the road. Understanding of risk, business impacts, what's going on, what the company could make if they let this thing go out the door today. Chances are, if the business is pushing really hard to get something out, it means they're going to make a lot of money on it. And whatever thing you might lose might not be as big as the money they're going to make on top of this, right? You might roll with it and go, great, we can expect a loss of X, but we can expect a profit of Y, and Y is multiples of X. Do it, man, right? That's all good. That kind of mentality has to exist. You have to understand what's going to happen and what's going to happen to the business as a result of this. So it has business impacts, right? Will this disrupt the business if something happens, right? It's not just about the initial loss, but what will happen to the business if we have a real event. This is part of risk, but this really is focused on understanding how the business works, and when the business doesn't work, what happens, right? That stuff is super, super critical. Too many of us, actually, and this transcends the boundary here too, even the people in this room, right? We don't spend enough time with the business understanding what's going on. We don't spend enough time talking with why a product is going to do what it's going to do for the business, how much money it's going to make, when it doesn't work, how much the business loses. We don't spend enough time talking about this stuff. It's really, really important. So if you're going to build a well-rounded team, this stuff has to happen, right? The threat modeling, the risk, the business impacts, that stuff has to happen along with teaching folks the basics, right? These last three, that's kind of general security, right? We could probably apply that to any security discipline in an organization. But it's super critical to making this work. You must not skip this part. We have some additional goals. Along with the stuff I've said, there's one driving mentality. And it's not about saying no. This whole thing is about finding creative ways to say yes. The answer is never no. The answer is yes. And here's what we have to do to get there. How many have done improv before? This is about yes-anding, right? This whole conversation is about yes-anding. That's the conversation you have to be in, and that's the mentality you need to be in when you go into these kind of discussions. A software security group should be there to say yes, and to figure out how to say yes. Even if it's ridiculous and crazy, if there's a good reason to do it, and of course make sure there's a good reason to do it, find out how you say yes. If somebody goes, I'm going to disable passwords here, and you think, that's crazy, why would I do that? And they go, because it reduces the friction and we make oodles of money. Well, okay, let's figure out how we can say yes and still have some safety nets, right? So maybe that's behavioral intelligence and monitoring and activity and saying, oh yeah, well this person normally looks like this and comes from this device, and if they didn't, maybe then I'll force them to log in. So you say yes, and that's great, but at this time maybe I also like to do this, right? I also want to be able to force them to log in if I really think there's something fishy going on. Okay, great, right? There's a compromise. You can still get that revenue impact and still protect yourself. That kind of mentality is the absolute must going forward, is finding the creative way to say yes. When you understand the business, and you understand the risk, and you understand how the business should operate, you can figure out why yes is important, right? Don't just say yes blindly, right? Figure out why yes is important, and then say yes. If it really isn't important, if it doesn't matter and it's going to put the company in a lot of jeopardy, it's your responsibility to say, yeah, we're not going to do that, right? There's a time to toe the line and really put the hard stop in. But understanding the business is a key to making sure that you can say yes appropriately. So there's a few outcomes of this. Doing this a little bit differently has a different kind of impact. High-functioning software security groups are part of the development process. And I don't mean you include them randomly because your SDLC says you must. I mean, they're actually part of the day-to-day discussion. They're doing code review, like everybody else is. They're part of the initial discussions before any code is written. The design process includes the security groups. And again, not because the SDLC dictates it, but because everybody wants them there, right? Because it goes faster this way. And again, right, this is not because they're required, right? Requirement is one thing, and you have to do that, right? If any of you are under organizational or regulatory constraints, audits, SOC 2 and high trust and PCI and all this stuff, you're going to have to, right? You're going to have to prove that you have an SDLC that matches that, and that's all fine and well, and you're going to do that for certification and compliance reasons. That's not what I'm talking about. That's just because policy, right? I mean because they're actually wanted, right? You grab them because you want their opinion. You respect their opinion. Because they are wanted is exactly why you want them there, right? If that's not the case, you have to fix it. You have to work very hard to make sure that everybody wants them around. And that group is really, really respected. A software security group helps ship software faster. That if you're doing that, you're always welcome, right? If you're going to make my job easier, if you're going to help me get this out the door faster, you're always welcome to come around, right? It's the honey instead of the vinegar. It's the carrot versus the stick. It's the whole thing, right? Sometimes it's the carrot stick, but that's a whole different story. But if you continually help as you walk by, people are they're gonna look forward to you walking by, and they're gonna invite you. Other teams will start actively seeking the advice of the software security group. Right now, if you had engineering teams come to the software security group, what's the biggest reason they won't? Has anybody ever gotten feedback of why a team didn't ask, the real feedback of why a team didn't ask for help before? Yeah. That's a symptom of the problem. Yeah? Yeah. Some of it's just, there's process problems. It's fear, right? If I go to this team, I'm going to have 10 times more work to do, and I already have too much work to do, and I can't get it done. If I reach out to this team, I'm going to end up with more work, right? That should not be the case, right? If it's done the right way, if it's done at the right time, you may slow down a little bit, but it's going to be very obvious why. And it's not going to be a lot. It's going to be a little bit, right? Oh yeah, we talked about this in the design process. We decided that it didn't work for us, and we're going to have to go a different route. And somebody goes, that's great. Here are the additional controls we need to put around this because we're exposing ourselves here. And we do it then, that's fantastic, right? If we wait till later and throw it over the wall and they go, okay, well, we got some serious problems. We've got to rework this. Now you have a team reworking it, right? They didn't ask up front because they were afraid of what was going to happen. Now we're a month behind because we didn't ask up front, right? That fear of asking, and really, understanding the cost of asking can be really, really detrimental, and you want to be able to fix that. You want to be able to control that, right? When you reduce or remove the fear of what will happen when you ask, people will ask a lot more. Right? This is the other side of it, right? They're going to ask them because they want them, but they're also going to ask because they're not afraid of asking. This is a huge thing, and people won't tell you this, right? This isn't something you're going to get openly and freely from a bunch of folks, because they're not going to say, I'm afraid to do my job, right? And they're not going to point a finger and go, they always give me more work. And maybe a few honest people will say, yeah, this is why I don't do it. But there's no excuse for that, right? There's no real excuse. If you hear that and go, you're not doing your job because you're afraid that not doing your job right will make you not do your job. Wait, what? Right? That doesn't make any sense at all, right? There's no logic you can defend there, right? So people aren't going to be super honest about that. Now, if you have a really toxic group, maybe there are some things you can talk about. But in general, you're not going to get that kind of feedback directly. It'll be indirectly, and it'll take some time. That's usually the cause, right? I've had the fortune in some cases of coming in as a consultant and talking to folks, one-on-one, saying this has nothing to do. I'm not going to talk to your boss. I really want to know why, and that's why, right? That's the answer I get, right? When they have no fear of impacts to their job, they start to be honest, and then you figure out what the real problem is. There's another outcome here. When you have a team of developers in your software security group, and that's your main focus, the amount of automation you have goes through the roof, right? Everything's a software problem, so they solve it like a software problem. Not always the best thing, by the way, but the net is positive, right? I had to do this thing twice, and I'm lazy, so now I'm going to make sure I never have to do this thing again. This is the last time I'm going to do it. It's going to be automated. This is an awesome outcome. How many of your controls are automated? A completely automated process where you just you cite them, you can show what the control looks like and the design of the automation, and it just kind of happens. Like that's pretty much the majority of your controls. Not many hands, right? They should be. When you pick a vendor, or when I pick a vendor, oh Jesus, I'm sorry. When I pick a vendor, the first thing I do is ask them if they have an API. First question: do you have an API? Can you show me the docs? So can I do the same thing I would do in the app or in the web page or whatever via an API? And some companies go, no thing. You have to just kind of suck it up. Thanks. Show them the door. If they have an API and I can ask them more details and I can automate, I can take what they're doing and I can feed it into a bigger process. That's awesome, right? That gets me way, way farther. Because the thing that one vendor does is one part of your puzzle, right? It's just this little piece. But if you go back through the entire history of what you're trying to do, you want to put the whole thing into one pipeline. You want one view, you want one system of controls, you want one kind of process around this whole thing. If I can't do that, that means I'm going to miss some stuff. If somebody has to click a button, somebody's going to be sick one day and forget to click the button. Or they're going to be on vacation. Or they're going to leave. And that knowledge transfer won't happen, that button won't get clicked, and that control will fail, right? I have no confidence in a control unless I can demonstrate automation. I really don't. Because at some point, the weakness is not the control, it's the humans that interact, that perform the control, right? Humans are always the weakness at the end of the day. And we're talking about ways in security. Humans are usually the easiest ways in anyways. But on the flip side of controls, that's a big deal. When you can automate, you can have more confidence in your controls. Now, you have to test your automation and make sure it doesn't fail. That would really be bad. But when you have an SSG that's comprised of mostly software developers, you end up with this as an outcome. It just kind of happens. You don't really have to say, you should automate this. That's just kind of a natural habit. The other outcome here is that security becomes part of the product, right? It's a feature. The feature of your product or part of your product is just security. Because any software security group that's also an engineering team will have a natural inclination to want to have a product. They want to ship a product, right? They will own the sense of, security as a feature or security as a product. They will care about that. Because it's just an innate thing. I have to have something that I deliver. I have to have something, they're wired that way, right? I need to deliver something. I'm going to deliver security. That's going to be the thing that I'm going to focus on, be part of my product. The end result ends up looking like real collaboration, right? The teams, instead of throwing things over the wall, will start to work together day in, day out. When you have to push the button, right? And sometimes you will. I'm not saying this is going to magically make the button go away. When you have to push the button, it's a lot easier. Because if you go to your CISO, or CISO goes to the CEO and says, we got to do this, we got to stop this, it can't happen, right? That's signal, and that's fine, and they'll take that in. If you, or the CISO and the CTO both go to the CEO and go, we have to stop this, because they both understand this and agree this is a thing, that's way more powerful, right? When you can grab other execs or other people high up that also agree with you because they've been working with you the whole time and understand, that message is amplified. It's not two people, it's, wow, two organizations are both telling me the same signal that we have to stop this right now and hold on. That's going to be a lot more powerful. It's going to be easier to push the button and cost you less when you convince a whole other group of people to go along with you, right? You're not just burning your own political capital. They're coming in too, right? you have a cosigner on your button, and it actually ends up being a lot easier. So when you can start to get people on board like that, that's really where powerful things start to happen. And that's why this collaboration ends up kind of interesting, right? And honestly, that's why we're all here, right? We're all here because we want to do the right thing. We want to do the same thing. We all have goals. We all point them in the same direction, and we all try to, really actually help each other move forward. That's the purpose. That's why we're here, and that's how a business wins. We have just a few minutes for questions. Yeah. Sure. So two answers for that. One is, yes, you're right. The first point you made about, you've given somebody a constraint, a control they need to implement, and they do the basic stuff, and that stops. That's actually where this works really well, because you don't give the people implementing the day-to-day features this problem. You give the software security group this problem and say, solve this problem as a library that everybody can use, and hand it to them and tell them they have to use that in their software, right? You put it that way. So the controls problems that you have aren't left to the daily feature developers to solve. They're left to the software security group to solve. That's the whole point, right? So when you put these specialized pieces in a group that's focused on just doing that, they're more effective. And when you have a group of people who really are top-class engineers, they know how to abstract the problem such that they can solve it for everybody, right? Things like crypto, you're going to get it wrong, right? And unless you understand it, you're going to get it wrong. And even when you understand it, you're going to get it wrong. We saw this with Apple just recently, right? Even they have a world-class team of people that understand really how to apply crypto, and they still got it wrong, right? This is a hard problem. But if you have a group focused on it, they're going to do the right thing. So giving that group those focused problems really actually helps the net better. Second, about the cloud, and we can go later, I very much disagree. I think that the cloud offers way better security than any data center out there. That's a whole different talk. But I have a whole lot of opinions about that. I would be hesitant to say that the cloud is the path of least resistance. I think there's a whole lot of things to consider there, and I'm happy to talk about it because we only have a few minutes here. I think that's a little bit of FUD, because I think there's a whole lot more the cloud offers that you can do straight up right away that give you way more visibility than you would ever have had in your own data center. Oh. Mm-hmm. Not everything. I agree with that. Not everything's a good fit. But I would say calling it the path of least resistance is probably not the right thing. Yeah.
I work for JPMC. We've got a SSG team that's growing, and you're right. It's hard to find someone with a deep development background who's also security-minded. Mm-hmm. That's the kind of people we're looking for. When you mentioned taking developers and training them, if you found a certain type of training or boot camp that works better than others, like making SEH certified, or your own homegrown?
So personal opinion time. I put zero stock in certifications. They haven't helped. They haven't gotten me any further along than where I started. Personal opinion only. I don't speak for anybody but myself when I say that. But feet to the fire is a good thing. Put them in the role. Let them understand that there's a whole lot of stuff they don't know. Right? Of course, guided, right? You need some guidance there. You need some hand-holding in the process. But sometimes one of the best ways to have somebody understand where they're in is kind of shock the system and go, wow, there's a whole lot I need to learn. And then start to give them, stuff to go on. And of course, you follow it up with training and you give them time to learn. You have to give them time to learn, because if you put them to the fire and give them no time to learn, that won't work either. But yeah, homegrown programs are the best, because you teach them the parts of your business that matter, right? A general boot camp in security is okay, and you'll get there, but unless they understand the business and why these particular problems are more important, because the entire class of problems don't apply to your business. There are a certain class of problems you actually have most often. That's the stuff you start with. You start with the immediate problems and work your way out. And I think that's my time. So I'm happy to take more questions outside, but I don't want to monopolize the other people's time. So thank you.